What's making Americans fat? It's an interesting question because the answer is actually not that hard to figure out. Yet the only way that you can actually get to the true answer is you have to get through all of the rhetoric. You have to get through all of the naysayers. You have to get through all of the medical establishment, food processing companies, diet books, pills, potion, lotions, and all the other things that are out there to get to the truth of what is actually making Americans fat. So, the way that I want to start this presentation today is a little bit different in the sense that the first thing I need is a commitment from the listener. That's right. I need you to commit to think not outside the box, but I need you to think like there is no box. See, I need you to throw away all of your belief systems. I need you to get rid of everything you think you know, or more importantly, the things that you may have been taught, the things that you may have read, the things that you may have seen on the internet or read in a book or heard from some, quote unquote expert somewhere. The best part about these Wednesday Lunch and Learns is, they are purely just for information for you. There's no tie-in here. ID Life just believes in health and wellness, and we believe in it so much that we provide this information for free, and then give you all the, sourcing data and other information to go find out for yourself the truth. That's what this is about. So in order to get to where we need to go today, we need to first and foremost pretend like there is no box and forget everything you know. So the easiest way to do that is to give you some examples of things that you just know to be true that in fact aren't. Let's start with this. Einstein failed math. You ever heard that one before? Actually, he failed an entrance exam for a school, but he excelled in math. It's funny how stories begin, stories start, and they end up somewhere. There is no evidence that Einstein ever failed math. If you thought that to be true, or you've ever said that, especially for somebody who struggles at math, that's not really what happened. How about this? Bulls hate red. The reality is bulls are colorblind. That's right. So when you have that little red cape, that they're, it's not that they're attracted to red. They're colorblind. They can't even see red. They actually perceive the motions of the bullfighter's cloth as a threat, and that is what makes them charge. So if you were one that thought that red was something that you avoided wearing when you were going to be around bulls, just know that they're colorblind. How about this one? Salty water boils quicker. Adding a sprinkle of salt to water makes no difference. In fact, it can actually make the boiling process take longer. That's an interesting one for me. Everyone seems to, throw salt in the water for some reason. I still to this day can't really figure out why. And I think it's probably because mom did, and she did because grandma did, and she did because grandma's grandma did. But the reality is it doesn't do anything to help with boiling water. In fact, it could slow it down. But the other thing is a lot of people do it because of pasta. The other thing they do with pasta is they drop oil in it because they want to stop the pasta from sticking. But the reality is it doesn't help with sticking at all. In fact, it only makes it greasy. Stirring prevents the sticking. That's what you have to do. So just so you know, oil doesn't really stop the stuck pasta. Now, this is my favorite, and this is one that if you've ever seen a presentation that we've done live, this is one I do all the time. This is a beautiful blue ocean. And I'm not sure there would be very many people out there that would argue with me that this ocean is both beautiful, it's blue, and then this is one of those areas when you look at this picture, you're thinking, this is somewhere I want to be. In fact, this could be an ID Life incentive trip somewhere at some point at some time that could have happened in the past. But the reality is you could sit there all day and just stare at this beautiful, beautiful blue ocean, and because that's your belief system. But the reality is this, that water is clear. It has been your entire life. The water is not blue. But our belief system is such that we would sit there and argue with somebody for days that the water is blue because we have been preconditioned that water is blue when we see it. I mean, it's with our eyes, so obviously it must be true. But when you actually get pointed out the fact that water is clear and it's a reflection of the sky, not necessarily of the color of the water, it kind of opens your eyes to other parameters. So today, that's what I want you to do. What I want you to do when we go through this is forget your education. Einstein was a pretty smart guy. And I do use his quotes quite often, and I do give him credit for a lot of things. Most importantly, with regard to myself, always keeping me intellectually curious. That's the one thing I learned most from reading his works and looking at his life. But the most important thing is that education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. In other words, don't make your foundation of knowledge be what somebody else taught you. Teach yourself. Go out and learn the answer for yourself. And that's what today is all about. So let's dive in. The balanced diet approach. Okay, so what is making Americans fat? One of the thought processes in America right now is that if I work out, that will create a caloric deficit, which allows me to then eat more of what I want, because as long as I stay in a negative situation, I'm going to be healthier. And I'm constantly the rat on the treadmill trying to chase my deficit on a weekly basis. Well, the reality is this doesn't work. It never has. It never will, because when you actually look at it and you try to balance out your caloric deficit, a liter of Coke is 54 minutes of lunges. A milkshake is 72 minutes of jumping rope. A donut, hey, that's only 88 minutes of crunches. Chips and queso, sure, I will swim for 130 minutes. Hey, that hamburger and fries, not a problem. 141 minutes on an elliptical and it's gone. 2 pieces of pizza, I'm sure everyone stops at 2. That's only about 159 minutes on the stair stepper. And then, of course, if I want to have one of those wonderful Starbucks Frappuccinos, that is just 170 minutes of Pilates. No problem. I'll go knock that out. See, the issue with the balanced diet approach is that as much as we would like to think that we can chase that negative number, you are never going to out-train a bad diet. It's just not going to happen. You are never going to catch up. And unfortunately, what you're doing is you're not changing your habits. You're not changing your diet and lifestyle. All you're trying to do is outwork your addiction. That's the reality. What happens if you get injured? What happens if you strain a muscle and you can't work out that week? What happens if something more severe happens? Now all of a sudden you have the same eating habits, but now you don't have the same workout habits. So what ends up happening? We start to put on the pounds, and we aren't even looking at, in this theory or this model with all these foods that we're consuming, metabolically what we're doing to ourselves. So the balanced diet approach just isn't there. And if you want a prime example, here's you a nice little Wendy's fast food meal that everyone has had at one point or another. Wonderful Frosties. Everyone knows what those things taste like. In fact, just the mention of the word Frosty, half the people on this webinar, their mouth started to water and they're trying to figure out where the nearest Wendy's is. So after this presentation, you can figure out where to go. But if you had one of these wonderful concoctions, what you would have to do is go run the Boston Marathon to work it off. That's right. So, just one meal. This is just, one sit down. This is one of their fast food menus. And you're going to have to go run the Boston Marathon. The balanced diet approach simply isn't going to work for you. So that is something that you should throw out the window, because this is part of what is making us fat, is our constant attempt to out-train our bad diet choices. Because the reality is the workouts are easy. The real challenges are faced in the kitchen. That's where we're headed with this, but you'll see what I'm talking about. This is something that was an advent of the American Medical Association, adopted and recommended by the American Heart Association, as well as a lot of other medical institutions. And hundreds of millions of dollars were spent across this country, hundreds of millions of dollars to prove this theory as correct. The thing that is causing Americans to be obese, according to all the medical professionals, was, we needed to reduce the fat in our diet, and we simply needed to eat less and move more. That was the approach. Well, there was a study done, the Women's Health Initiative study, done by the National Institute of Health in 2006. What happened was they published their findings in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on this one study. And what they did is they studied roughly about 50,000 women. I think there was about 49,000 when it was all said and done. What ended up happening over 7.5 years is, for the women that were in the control group, the people that they were trying to study, they reduced their calories by 30%. They increased their carbs, their fruits, and their vegetables and grains. And then they also increased their exercise by roughly 14%. So what they did is they adopted the AMA guideline of a low-fat diet with increased exercise and reduced their calories. So they ate less, they moved more, and they reduced their fat. So what happened? Well, the results showed a 13% reduction in metabolism for that control group, people that were doing the recommended diet, and no weight difference between the do-nothing group and the study group. So let that sit in for a second. The people that were on this special diet that was recommended based upon the low-fat, eat less, move more movement, for 7.5 years reduced their caloric intake by 30%. They increased the carbs, fruit, vegetables, and grains, and increased exercise. And as a result, all they did is lowered their metabolism and had absolutely no weight difference from the people that did absolutely nothing for that 7.5 years other than eat the way they had always eaten. And of course, the other thing is there was no waist circumference difference as well. So it wasn't even like they had more muscle mass on their body, which is another common thing you have. Now, am I trying to say here that you don't need to work out? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying at all. And if that's what you think, then you're missing the point. What I'm pointing out here is this whole concept of reducing calories by reducing fat in the diet, by focusing on increasing carbs, fruits, vegetables, and grains. This is just another opportunity to try to create a balanced diet type approach of my exercise is going to create a caloric deficit on my diet if I reduce fat and focus on fat because carbs are fuel, and it's just, they're focusing on the wrong thing. And this study proved that that theory does not work. So we spent hundreds of millions of dollars here. You know what? We said, let's do it again. So we did a health study. I can't make it up. This actually did occur. In 2010, the New England Journal of Medicine published the health study findings. In this study, we went to 42 schools, a little over 4,600 kids, grades 6 to 8. And what ended up happening is half got the low-calorie, low-fat diets along with increased exercise. The other half were just in the control group. And what happened at the end of 3 years, both the do-nothing group and the eat less, move more group had reduced their obesity rates by from 50 to 45%. So what does that mean? What that means is the eat less, move more got the same results as the do nothing group. Because kids are kids, and as they grow, they get more active and they do more things, so obesity rates naturally dropped. But there was no substantial difference between the two. So again, the eat less, move more movement was found to have absolutely no support. So if this is what you think, if this is what you're still listening to, if you're listening to all of these experts out there, or even medical professionals that say, hey, the way to stop being fat is to simply just eat less and move more, well, just know that science has proven that the scientists are wrong. That simply isn't the case. In fact, what's worse is they've also shown that these reduced fat, low fat type diets are also wrong. That it's not just the fat, it's the wrong types of fat, and there is a difference. So, eat less, move more is a failure. This is not the approach. This is not what's causing us to be fat. It just doesn't work. So, take this in for a second. Calories are not making Americans fat. How about that? Now, you're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, Mark, I know you told me to think without a box. I know you showed me some things that I thought to be true that maybe weren't. But hey, I know this one's true. I know calories are making Americans fat. But I'm here to tell you calories are not making Americans fat. That is not what's doing it at all. And I'm about to show you what is. 1977 began a shift in the American diet to a low-fat, eat less, move more approach to health. Okay? This is what we started. You can thank Ansel Keys for this. There's a lot of other things with the American Medical Association, American Heart Association, a lot of other organizations out there that jumped on this bandwagon. A lot of medical professionals jumped on the bandwagon of fat is the culprit, fat is the key, fat is what's giving people heart disease. We've got to reduce the fat in our diet. When we started down that path of moving fat out of the diet, though, what happened was we started loading our diets up with sugar. See, fat has flavor. Fat has texture. Fat has something that we actually enjoy in our foods. And when that was taken out, we lost all of the texture and flavor in food. And what we replaced it with was sugar. And more importantly, processed sugars. That's what happened. This all started in 1977. So, what happened between 1977 and 2000? Childhood obesity more than doubled in ages 6 to 11, tripled in ages 12 to 19, and obesity related diseases became so common, America eliminated adult onset diabetes as a medical term. Now we just refer to it as type 2. So this shift, this whole, design of getting away from fat, this was the result. This is just what's happening to our kids. I haven't even got into the adult concept yet. Let's look at this. Did you know that one soda a day, just one? So for all the parents out there that are saying, I keep my kid only having to have one soda a day, increases a child's chance of obesity by 60%. Now, here's the thing. But there's no fat in soda. See, what happened was when we moved away from the concept of, potential sugar is the issue, and instead we said, no, fat is the culprit. Fat is what we need to remove from our diet. We need to go low fat. That opened the door for a lot of things, but most importantly, what it did is people started looking at the label for fat, ignored the sugar, and what ended up happening is we got addicted to sodas and sugar-laden foods and snack foods and everything else. And man, sugar is one heck of an addictive ingredient. But if you look at this one, there is no fat in soda, so guess what? Must be okay, right? If you're following the AMA guidelines and what medical doctors were saying. Unfortunately, it didn't help. Because here's the thing, obese children are 17 times more likely to develop diabetes in adulthood. Now, I'm not trying to convict parents. I'm not trying to tell people that they're doing something wrong. What I'm trying to say is we need to help our kids. Our kids learn how to eat at our table. We cannot, say or blame somebody else. We cannot blame time. We cannot say, this is somebody else's fault. This is us. We have to get back into the kitchen making our own stuff. It's really that simple. We just have to. Our kids' health is dependent upon it. This is the other one that should make you quite upset. In 1977, when we started moving fat out of the diet, we started getting into all these processed chemicals in foods and processed carbohydrates and other things because we needed to make food inexpensive, available because food was too expensive if you were going to have nothing but sugar type ingredients in it. So we had to create sugar substitutes. See, because in the 1920s, type 2 diabetes was a rich person's disease. It was not a prevalent disease in the United States because sugar was expensive. 1977, when we made this shift and all of a sudden sugar was coming in, we needed to subsidize this industry of food additives. So what ended up happening was we have 30 times more federal subsidies, or our tax dollars, going to these chemicals and these things other than unprocessed carbs. So fruits and vegetables get 30 times less than these ingredients. So that's right, we are subsidizing the very things that are killing us. Thank you, Congress. In fact, if you look at the most recent USDA Choose My Plate diet guidelines, these are the ones, dietary guidelines for Americans, 2015-2020. You've seen now we have two multi-million-dollar studies, hundreds of millions of dollars of studies done, showing that fat, low calorie, move more, eat less diets don't work. We scientifically proven. But here's the most recent guidelines that we get. So if you look at it, make half your plate fruits and vegetables. Absolutely great recommendation. Focus on whole fruits, yes. Instead of canned fruits and things like that are just loaded with sugar and other things, absolutely. Vary your veggies, yeah, why not? Variety is a good thing. Vary your protein routine, sure. Find all kinds of different types of proteins. But then we start looking at some things. Make half your grains whole grains. What about the other half, and why whole grains? And why do we need all those grains? Is this really what we should be doing? And there's no real reason. I don't understand this. And of course, the move to low fat and fat-free milk or yogurt. We have proven that the fat thing is just wrong. I mean, we've proven this. When you go to low fat and fat free milk and yogurt, what is in those products but sugar? Why would we be making that recommendation? And then, of course, drink and eat less sodium, saturated fat, and added sugars. How about drink none? I mean, it's just, this is asinine. That, this is our recommendation. This is where we are right now on our federal scale. This is what's being taught in our schools, and it's just flat out wrong. So, calories are not making us fat. What is making us fat? Insulin. That's what's making us fat. It really is that simple. Insulin is making Americans fat. No, I'm not talking about the type that you inject. I'm talking about foods that cause insulin production in the body. So let's jump in and explain this theory so that you can understand it better. See, because a lot of people don't really understand that insulin is a hormone. It is a response that the body has to the foods that we eat. And a lot of us are dealing with an excessive amount of insulin because of the foods that we're choosing. But in order to understand insulin and what it does, first you need to understand the difference between glucose and fructose. So we're going to go to Sugar 101 class here for a second. Fructose is broken down in the liver. So fructose bypasses the bloodstream, goes directly to the liver. It is turned into triglycerides. Some of it stays in the liver, turning into fatty liver. We're going to see in a minute fatty liver is bad because fatty liver causes what we call insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is what ends up causing type 2 diabetes. I'm going to make that set in. Insulin resistance is what ends up causing type 2 diabetes because it increases the amount of glucose in our blood. So it's not the insulin necessarily that causes the type 2 diabetes or the sugars that cause type 2 diabetes. It's actually the fructose, that type of sugar that is processed through the liver and broken down into triglycerides that turns our liver into a fatty liver that actually causes it. And then, of course, those fats go into the bloodstream that aren't stored in the liver. Glucose, on the other hand, is broken down in the liver and sent into the bloodstream, and your brain signals the pancreas to create the hormone insulin to help process and move that glucose into the cells, organs, and tissues. So that is our pancreas that is creating the insulin response. Realize what I'm talking about here is type 2 diabetes, type related issues. So type 1s are a little bit different than what I'm talking about here. So you need to understand the difference between fructose and glucose. So glucose, what ends up happening is you eat a food with high carbohydrates. This is, a bread, a starch, a pasta, something of that nature. What you're going to end up happening is grains, fruits, milk, and sweets, those types of things. Those carbs change to sugar. That's the glucose. That glucose enters the blood, goes to all parts of the body for energy. Then, of course, your pancreas releases the insulin, and, of course, you have this energy boost. And everyone thinks that, carbs are necessary for my energy. I got to have the carbs in order to have the energy. Some of that is true, but the problem is the types of carbs that most people are grabbing are the simple carbs, not the complex carbohydrates, which is a discussion for another day. So how does insulin work? I now have produced insulin into my bloodstream. I know that I have glucose in my bloodstream. So what happens with insulin? Well, think of insulin as a key. Okay, you have a cell. Your cells are down at the bottom. Every cell has an insulin receptor. That insulin receptor is like a door lock. Insulin is the key. The insulin comes in, goes into the door lock, and opens it up. That allows the glucose then to go into the glucose channel so that the cell can absorb the glucose. That's a natural production of insulin. That's how it works. What happens, though, when we get the fatty liver is that we have all of this insulin in our bloodstream, but unfortunately all of the doors are locked, which means the glucose can't enter the cells. And what ends up happening is our body thinks, well, we may need to produce more insulin because that has to be the reason why we still have all this glucose in the bloodstream, and that's what causes most of the problems. See, because when you really look at it, the normal cell process is, you have the insulin release, the insulin goes in, it opens the door, the glucose goes in, and all of a sudden all the cells are happy. But When you're insulin resistant, you have that fatty liver because you have too much fructose consumption. That fructose consumption causes the fatty liver. Imagine the fatty liver basically goes in and puts too much fat into your door, if you will, so that the key won't work. Now all of a sudden you have all of this insulin, all of this glucose, and what happens is the body says, okay, well, I still have glucose, so I must still need to produce insulin. Common misconception is the body stops producing insulin. That's not it at all. In fact, the body continues to produce more. What happens though is because you're insulin resistant, you can't process that glucose into the cells, and the more insulin gets thrown in, now all of a sudden you start storing it into the body's organs, tissues, and other things. And of course, you develop high glucose blood or high sugar content blood, which results in type 2 diabetes. Sucrose. Sucrose is table sugar. It is the perfect combination of glucose and fructose. So it has both the insulin spiking glucose and the fatty liver insulin resistant fructose. It is a combination of the two. It is what we call the double whammy because you are getting the both sides of the equation when you consume sucrose. High fructose corn syrup, on the other hand, is 55% fructose, 45% glucose, different than sucrose. It is more on the fructose side. Remember, fructose is the one that is going to cause our type 2 diabetes. It's the one that's going to cause the fatty liver. It's the one that's going to cause insulin resistance. But it also has the insulin responding glucose because remember, fructose has very little insulin response, which is why so many people think fructose is good. But the reality is, as you've seen, fructose is what actually is causing a lot of our issues and problems, but it also has the high insulin spiking glucose. So what do we use high fructose corn syrup for? I'm going to ruin some people's days today. How about I told you high fructose corn syrup is actually in artificial sweeteners. It's in peanut butter. It's in sodas. Obviously, it's almost in every soda. It's in headache medicine. Let that sit in for a second. It is in ketchup. Yes, I know I talk about ketchup a lot. I have a family addicted to it, but they need to know that this substance that is literally killing us is in these things. Yes, it's in French fries. It's in hamburgers that we eat on a regular basis. It's in processed foods and snacks. The biggest culprits are our sugary beverages and, of course, our table snacks, our quick grabs, especially these wonderful little 100-calorie snacks that so many people want to buy because what it does is makes them feel good because what they're doing is, oh yeah, that's only 100 calories because they're still on the balanced diet approach because they're still trying to get to their caloric deficit because it's not what you eat, it's how much you eat, and that's going to get me the results I want, said nobody who was successful ever. You can only starve yourself for so long before you will bounce back. The reality is you have to change your diet and lifestyle. You don't have a temporary fix to long-term problems. You do need to know that even though fructose is the big culprit, the big thing that we're trying to watch out for, the thing that really is causing the fatty liver and insulin resistance and everything else, there is a difference between fructose found in fruit and that found in high fructose corn syrup and other artificial sweeteners and added sugars. So when you're reading the back of a label or if you get into a discussion about somebody with fruit and other things, there's a big difference between the two. So don't think that they are created equal because they are not. How about artificial sweeteners? What if I told you that artificial sweeteners raise insulin levels worse than regular sugar? Let me let that set in for a second. See, artificial sweeteners were the answer to everyone's prayer. We were addicted to sugar. We had this sweet tooth. We could not get rid of the sweet tooth. And unfortunately, sugar has high calories in it. It just does. So when people said, okay, look, I am tired of this. I need to start getting to my calorie reduction method. I need to balance out. I need to get to my negative number so that I can start to lose weight. What was the answer? Artificial sweeteners. Some are 6, 8, 900 times sweeter than regular sugar. And they have 0 calories. So if they're 0 calories, they must be fine because we are still in the belief system that calories cause us to be fat. Calories do not cause you to be fat. Insulin does. And these sweeteners will spike your insulin levels at a greater level than regular sugar. So, yes, they are worse than regular table sugar. In fact, the average American is now consuming 56 gallons a year of soda. 56 gallons. But what if I told you this? Diet soda has a 20% greater insulin spike than regular Coke. That's right. So you ordered the diet drink thinking, it's 0 calorie. It must be better for me. I'm on a diet. This is good for me. I'm diabetic. I'm going to Diet Coke because it doesn't have sugar. It says so, 0 sugar. But what ends up happening is we have a 20% greater insulin spike using the diet drink than we do in regular. So is the answer to move to regular? No. The answer is don't drink sodas. That's the answer. Don't do it. It's not good for you. It's not helping. In fact, if you want to know how bad it really is, there was a study done by the Northern Manhattan Study, is what they called it. Consuming just 2 diet sodas per day increases your risk of contracting cardiovascular disease by 43%. Okay, so how is this possible? Diet soda does not have any fat in it. Well, the answer is simple. Because insulin is what's driving heart disease, obesity, and metabolic syndrome in this country. It is not fat. It is not calories. It is the insulin spike from the foods that we are choosing to eat. So what is making us fat? It is insulin. Hands down, that is what's doing it to us. Let's look at something else. 1980, only 1% of the Chinese population had type 2 diabetes. 1% in 1980. Now, what happened? In a single generation, okay? Around the late 1990s, early 2000s, people got conscious of what was happening with the drinking of sodas and the obesity rate in this country, and we stopped drinking sodas at the same rate. In fact, Coca-Cola and a lot of the other beverage companies saw a big dip in their stock prices because they had like 9 straight years of reducing numbers on the profit line. So what they do? They moved to Asia. And what happened in that one generation, in 33 years? Well, by 2013, type 2 diabetes in China had risen to 11.6%. Just took them 33 years. They started drinking the American beverage of choice, and boom, all of a sudden the obesity rates, the diabetes rates, everything went through the roof. Thank you, high fructose corn syrup. Thank you, glucose fructose. You are better than even our military is at killing people in a very slow way. This is really what's happening all over the world. This is just the reality of things. Insulin is killing all of us. This isn't just an American issue. This is becoming a world issue. You know, we just have to get control of what we're consuming on a regular basis, because if we don't, as you can see, it doesn't take very long and you can have a generational change. So, what if I told you diabetes has a direct correlation to sugar, not calories? See, most people think that diabetes is caused by obesity. That's what they think. The reality is obesity is caused by insulin, which is caused a spike because of the sugars that we consume. That's what's causing it. So don't think somebody, just because somebody's obese, that, you know, they're subject to diabetes. No, really what it is you got to look at their fructose consumption. You got to look at, you know, whether or not they have the fatty liver. You have to see what's going on with the person themselves. And you have to really get down to what the true culprit is that's causing it in the first place. So let's look at the normal diabetes treatment protocol. Now, I need you to understand this has a 0% cure rate. Let me make sure you heard me on that. This treatment protocol, which is consistent all across the United States, has a 0% cure rate. These drugs do not cure diabetes. They do not. And you can ask any doctor, they'll tell you these do not cure diabetes. So the question is, what does? And we'll get to that in a sec. But the reality is, if you're getting type 2 diabetes or you're pre-diabetic, know that taking the pill is not going to cure it. It's not going to let you just keep doing what you're doing. In fact, it's going to make it worse. But what happens is you start out with metformin or something very close to it, or some type of generic. Then you go to the sulfonylureas, and all of the side effects that come along with those, and eventually you make your way into insulin injections. But what happens is high insulin levels causes obesity and type 2 diabetes. That's kind of what happens. You have the high insulin levels coupled with the fatty liver or the insulin resistance, because we've talked about the fructose glucose combination. And what that then ends up causing is type 2 diabetes. The medical treatment is to increase insulin production. So that's right. What these things do is try to, they increase the insulin in the bloodstream, and they allow your body to digest more insulin. So you have all this insulin in your body. The pancreas is creating it because it's flowing through your body. What we need is the body's organs and tissues, because the cells are getting full because of our insulin resistance. We need the body to be able to absorb this insulin. So as a result, that's what these drugs do. They allow the organs, tissues, and other things to absorb this glucose, this insulin that's in your body. Well, what happens when the insulin production is increased? Well, increased insulin production will make you fat. So what ends up happening is increased weight will make the disease worse. So we know insulin is making us fat. The treatment for diabetes is to give you something that's going to increase your insulin production. If I increase my insulin production, it's going to increase how much I weigh, because we know that the side effect to all of these drugs is weight gain. And if I gain more weight, it's going to make the disease worse. Hence the 0% cure rate. So if you know somebody that's diabetic, you know somebody that's pre-diabetic, and hey, they're living their life this way, and they're trying to manage it with drugs and or insulin, they need to look at what the true cure for the disease is. See, type 2 diabetes reversal comes about by eliminating processed foods, sugars, and starches from your diet. You don't need them. Now realize this does not mean complex carbohydrates. There's difference. It does not mean eliminating fruits from your diet. That's not the answer either. It's increasing daily exercise. We need to move again. This does not mean you have to join a gym and do all those things. It just means we need to move. We got to move our body. We can't stay stagnant. And of course, avoid artificial sweeteners. Avoid all of that stuff, because when you go there, you don't understand that you're actually causing more harm than good. This is the way that you get to a reversal. Diet and lifestyle modification is the answer to diabetes. It is not drugs. It is not injections. You have to take control of this disease. A simple weight loss plan. Reducing insulin-producing foods has resulted in a 100% success rate of weight reduction and improved health. So when we started today, I told you we were going to tell you what is causing Americans to be fat. And we have. It's insulin. Our foods that we're choosing to eat that are causing insulin spikes, and more importantly, the fructose that we're consuming in the form of the beverages that we're drinking, the additive foods, the snack foods, and things like that is causing the high fructose in our liver, that's causing the fatty liver and insulin resistance, is resulting in the type 2 diabetes. All of that, if we can reduce those things that we're eating on a regular basis, okay, eating and drinking, 100% of the time you will lose weight and improve your health. It happens every single day. So you can continue to count calories. You can continue to try to do the balance method if that's what you choose, or you can follow the guidelines of the American Medical Association and others about low fat, low calorie, high movement diets. But over and over and over again, those have been proven not to work. What has been proven 100% of the time is reduce insulin spiking foods in your body, and boom, guess what happens? You will lose weight. This does not mean carbs are bad. This does not mean fats are bad. This does not mean proteins are bad. What it means is you need to understand the difference between a caloric dense food, has high nutritional value, and a calorically depleted food like sugar that has no nutritional value whatsoever. So weight loss starts today. You're now equipped with the information you need to get the results that you're looking for. All you have to do is look at what you eat on a regular basis. Understand what fructose is. Understand what glucose is. Understand the effect that what you're drinking and eating has on you. If you're a 2 or 3 diet soda a drink person a day and you're pre-diabetic, you need to understand that what you're doing is you're actually throwing yourselves into diabetes faster. We need to understand that what we think to be true isn't always true. and that we need to educate ourselves with information so that we can make informed choices, not only for ourselves, but for the people that we care about and the people that we love. And that's what these presentations are all about. You know, at Ideal Life, we're big believers in the diet and lifestyle choices that we make create our nutritional gaps. And that if we can find a way to improve our diet and lifestyle and fill those nutritional gaps, we can actually have healthy living, which is what we all strive for. So that's what these presentations are for. More importantly, that's why we are here, which is to help you do just that.